I don't need the rich and famous. I've met, retired British bobbies walking on the Thames. I've spent a great afternoon walking a small town in Greece, watching a baker, a cobbler, a butcher work in their shops and engaging with them, and they would share their stories.
You're watching the Spotlight Network, starring Hollywood's newsman,
And if you were just
Logan
trying to
Crawford.
investigators, they now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators. This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're setting sail on an unforgettable journey with a terrific author. His name is John William DeClaris, and he has penned a book you're just going to love. It is called Travel Tales: European Adventures from the River's Edge. This captivating collection of historical fiction is inspired by real people and places unfolding along a scenic river cruise from Amsterdam to the Czech Republic. With gripping World War II accounts, espionage intrigue, and heartwarming love stories, the author masterfully reveals the rich human experiences behind each European landmark. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. John William, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, Logan. I'm really looking forward to this. I respect your work, and you're actually my first interview, so I'm really thrilled to do this. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Right back at you. I respect your work a great deal as well, which is why you're on this show. This is such an imaginative book, a useful book, an informative book. It really kind of fills a lot of niches.
Thank
Tell
you.
us a little bit about the inspiration behind it to write it.
Well, the inspiration of this book is really joy of traveling and being in the moment and making the story experience immersive so that you feel like you've taken that vacation. And it really, the inspiration came when I was on a 2023 river cruise from Amsterdam to the Czech Republic. And I was going to use that off time on the ship to write my dementia book. But as I started to go into some of the towns, some of the thought sites that I saw, the people I encountered, the experiences I had, stories just came into my imagination for that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put the dementia book to the side. I've been working on it for several years, like Julia Child on her first cookbook. And I said, I'm going to just put the creative energies into this, and that will sponsor some other components of it. And so that first story was an accidental tour into this little town in Goringham, and we were supposed to go someplace else. Weather didn't allow it, so we had a choice of wander on our own, which is what I did. And I run into little shops, into little stores, and saw, and a whole story wove itself out of a cheese shop and a Jewish cemetery and this small little town. And I thought, oh wow, this story made itself, and it was just very happy to do it. And other stories came out of it. The cruise itself went through a lot of different towns. This is not all of them. I just chose 11 of what I thought were more interesting, esoteric towns that don't normally get spotlight.
Absolutely. I actually think it'd be almost like it's a great travel guide because your imaginative storytelling kind of brings everything to life and also gives the history behind it,
Mhm.
which is interesting as well. What were some of the European landmarks that struck you? And maybe choose one to tell the folks at home a little bit about the story you wrote about that
Sure.
landmark.
The one that really, if I could show it, I would, was the Würzburg Castle, the Würzburg Palace in the town of Würzburg. And one of the unspoken heroes in the movie, The Monuments Men, was a guy named Spillman, who actually restored this castle because after World War II, it had been destroyed. But he walked in, and on the ceiling, he saw this beautiful artwork. It was, like, painted in the 16th century or something like that, of the way they saw the world. And he said, no, we have to save this. Well, the challenge of a short story is, I mean, that itself could be a whole book. How do you condense and make an interesting article out of that? And so as I'm walking through this, I'm thinking, okay, this whole building has been destroyed. Where did they get the wood? And then that made me think, as I researched about his character, he was passionate about this. So I created the whole fictional story of like, how did he get wood? So he went upriver, found a guy who had a lumber mill who was like, look, there's nothing for me in Germany anymore. Why
Mm-hmm.
should I stay here? Well, we'll give you lots of money. Well, what good is that? I don't want money. I want a future. And that's where the story unfolds. So it's a very short, simple story about that, but it's told through the eyes of the grandfather, who now is an older man, but when he was a child, when he witnessed this event. So that's the fictional component of this. Just happened to be a passenger on the cruise. I happened to hear him in the palace saying, son, your legacy blood is in the woods here. And I'm like, okay, there's a story here. And that's how I introduced that story in the book.
Were any of the stories that you tell in the book based on conversations that you had with fellow travelers?
Yes, there was a couple of stories that were like that. One of them actually that occurred was the one that was it's in the last trip. It's the one that's in Kutna Hora, Czech Republic. And it was, I bumped into one of the passengers there who'd talked about he grew up in the area and how this bone ossuary was not so much of a travel site, but it was kind of a spooky place that the kids would try to go into at night. And so that wove that whole story about, two kids who, it's an annual thing of two of the best kids in the school spend the night in this ossuary to face their fears. And from that, they actually, it's a boy and a girl that end up becoming great friends and become a married couple. And that
Wow.
whole story came out of seeing the ossuary, being in this place, and this is casual passage of story told by a fellow passenger.
Very cool. Very cool. Have you envisioned this perhaps as a series? I
Yes.
mean, I think you've got like this cool vehicle of, the riverboat cruise with this traveler who is maybe even a Walter Mitty type where he daydreams about what happened there and it comes into fruition. Tell us about your vision for a series on this.
Well, the travel sales series, I've got another one prepped in the queue. I'm going to be going to Alaska.
Hmm.
So it's going to be a cruise along Alaska, similar town, set up of what are some towns, pick up some of the interesting stories that are there. The third one that's in the queue is from a 2012 trip that I had taken to Russia from Moscow up to St. Petersburg. And it was a very similar nature. And that one is itching to go. What's in between this current book and the Alaska book is a dementia caregiving book that I've put together. But for this book, for this series of travel tales books, what I'd like to be able to suggest to any of the readers here is I've got a website above. You can go there, and it shows you pictures of each story, each town that was in the story. Some of them are 360s. You get a panorama, but there's also an excerpt from the chapter in the book and in the essay, and it tells you how and why I wrote the story for that town.
Wonderful. It kind of makes the reading experience interactive, which
Exactly.
I think is
Exactly.
great. If you want to know more, and particularly in this age where everything's got a hyperlink,
Yes.
it's nice that we can go to your website and click and see more
Exactly.
pictures, read more about it. I think it's a wonderful idea. It's the orgonautcaregiver.com.
Correct.
And tell us about your dementia book. That one sounds intriguing as well. Of course, that is nonfiction.
Well, that's nonfiction, but there are a lot of books that are out there. They're all well written. I'm sharing my personal journey as a dementia caregiver and legal guardian. So I'm going both not only the hands-on caregiving and working with facilities, but I'm also talking about the administrative and legal aspects of being a legal guardian. I share the victory points. I share lessons learned. It's done in a way so that the book is designed. It took me a while to come up with this design. So it doesn't matter where you start in the book. You could start chapter one or chapter 25. It doesn't make a difference because you're going to navigate throughout it. It's almost in many ways like a recipe book. How do I go to quick, short, simple answers? But it's not just cold words. I'm sharing my journey with this. I'm sharing the lessons learned. I'm sharing aspects as the primary patient was my dad who had dementia. I've had to do some dementia caregiving for other loved ones. I talk about issues like taking away a driver's license and, how to deal with federal agencies that are being obstinate and how to, work with facilities so that you can achieve the goal of dementia caregiving is to provide the safest, softest, most dignified landing in life that can be experienced and enjoyed. And that was what I had told the facilities, like, this is the journey, guys. This is how we're going to frame this. Everything we do has to fit within that mantra there. But thanks for asking.
Well, that's a wonderful mantra to have. It is so difficult caring for people with dementia.
Hmm.
I see it through the eyes and actions of loved ones. I mean, because there's a lot of frustration
Hmm.
involved.
Hmm.
Dad, why don't you just be like
Right.
you were? I mean, you almost feel like that. Mom, talk to me and make sense. Don't repeat yourself, you know?
Right.
It's really hard. So I'd imagine part of being a good caregiver is making sure you take time to take care of yourself, right? Give
Right.
yourself the oxygen mask.
Right. Right. And again, and thank you for weaving this back into why travel tales, because for dementia caregiving, it's very hard to get away, if at
Yeah.
all. And so the travel tales is that little vacation. There's a, if reading is not your thing and you like audiobooks, there's an audiobook out with this as well for each chapter. It's told in a voice that I would have used, giving accents, etc. But it gives you 35 to 60 minutes, between half an hour to an hour of a nice vacation. It gives you the experience of being on a cruise or an ad aspect of the cruise, parts of the town, and it takes you away from your current situation and gives you a nice break. I'm going to try to do the same things with podcasting later on for dementia caregiving. That's the approach. But this is my first foray. So, as I like to tell people, I'm writing my second chapter in life, my next
Well,
act.
you're doing great. I mean,
Thank
you're
you.
so articulate and eloquent. Your book is beautiful. You're, a learned person. You have a lot to share. You have a lot of content within you.
Thank
So
you so
you're
much.
doing great. And I think all the avenues you're going to explore, such as podcasting, would be wonderful as well, because we need more good, strong voices like yours out
Thank
there.
you. Thank you so
I,
much. That
oh,
really
my
means a lot.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And it's genuinely true and from the heart. Um, I only like to travel really if there's a purpose.
Hmm.
As a journalist for many, many years, we would cover the World Series or the Super Bowl or travel to wherever it might be. For a reason, we were working it. It
Right.
kind of makes travel more fun. So has your travel experience changed now that you view it as an author?
It is now, because that's a real good question, because I I've always in years past, in fact, I had a friend of mine who had the world's worst story. Is her parents and uncle took her on a road trip through US, and they drove through the Grand Canyon. They never stopped. They just drove by and saw it, which is just crazy. Or that's like riding the cheap rides on Disney World. If I'm going to do this now, I want to engage in with people. So I've always been a people person. I love to hear their backstories. I love to. I don't need the rich and famous. I've met, retired British bobbies walking on the Thames. I've spent a great afternoon walking a small town in Greece, watching a baker, a cobbler, a butcher work in their shops and engaging with them, and they would share their stories. It was the same thing here with travel tales, and the same thing in the Russia book, more particularly, because I would meet people in these small towns and engage with them in dialogue and topics here. I'm hoping the same thing for Alaska, because this one is part nature, part small town, and I like to wander. So that's the mission there, is to wander and go beyond what's on the tour map.
Wonderful. Has the Russia book been written already?
No, it has not.
Okay.
That's the next one. What I'm finding very hard is, and it's, I've got probably ghosts of English teachers who are now sitting there going, like you're talking, too many run-on sentences. The problem is just packing too much information in. This
Right.
was the big challenge for this first book of like, what do I put in there that's just enough to get it and not have it become too long? So I'm
Yeah.
learning it. It's a fun process. The journey really is the experience in this.
Oh, sure. And you're right on target too. We call that information overload in the
Yes.
business. If you
Yes.
give people too much information, they can't digest it, they can't absorb it, they're just overwhelmed and they start to ignore it. But you did a great job with your river book that we're talking
Thank you.
about today,
Thank you.
European Adventures from the River's Edge. So I'm sure you'll find that same formula again or improve upon it even for Alaska and for Russia. Folks, the book we've been talking about today is called Travel Tales, European Adventures from the River's Edge. It is a moving and masterful blend of history, humanity, and travel. It will be your great escape. Read it a chapter at a time and just marvel in it. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. It's been my great thrill and pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's been all mine. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time
Bye-bye.
on Spotlight.